Okay, so today we're diving into some interesting financial documents for a company called DigiPlus Interactive Corp.
Yeah, it looks like they're based right here in the Philippines.
That's right.
Mm.
Um, we asked you, our listeners, to send in some filings for companies you wanted us to take a closer look at.
And we got a ton of great submissions this time around, but this one really stood out.
Yeah, this one's got it all, honestly. Big revenue jumps, legal battles, international expansion. It's a wild ride.
Absolutely. So we've got their 2024 Form 17A right here. That's like their annual report to the SEC here in the Philippines, lays out their business and their financial health.
And of course, we also have their audited financial statements to back all that up.
Yep. So our mission today, or actually our mission every episode is to sort through these
Pull
filings.
up the juiciest bits.
The stuff that really matters.
Exactly. And give you, our listeners, the inside scoop without, drowning you in a sea of financial jargon.
We're going to break it down plain and simple.
No, one of the first things that caught my eye was this name change. They used to be called Leisure and Resorts World Corporation.
Traded under the symbol LR, right?
Yep. But they rebranded themselves as DigiPlus Interactive Core in February 2023.
New name, new stock symbol Play OS seems like they're really emphasizing the digital side of their business now.
Definitely a sign of the times. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's back up a bit. What exactly does DigiPlus do?
So they operate in the amusement and recreation sector here in the Philippines, and they've got a bunch of subsidiaries that handle different parts of the business.
Right. And I got to say, the one that really rings a bell for me is AB Leisure Exponent Inc., or ABLE for short.
Oh, yeah. ABLE, better known as Bingo Bonanza Corporation. These guys are like the bingo pioneers here in the Philippines.
Bingo Bonanza. I mean, who hasn't heard of them? So they run a whole network of bingo halls across the country.
That's right. We're talking serious bingo operations. ABLE itself has got 30 subsidiaries. Yeah, and they control a whole bunch of bingo parlors, 126 to be exact, through their affiliates where they hold a minority stake.
Okay, so it's like a bingo empire, and they're doing all this under license from PADCOR, right?
Exactly. PAGCOR, that's the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, the government body that regulates all the gaming here.
Gotcha. So bingo's clearly a big part of their business.
Right.
But what else falls under the DigiPlus umbrella?
Well, there's also Blue Chip Gaming and Leisure Corporation, BCGLC for short.
Catchy.
They handle investments and management for various gaming and leisure activities.
They're like the venture capitalists of the fun world.
Kind of.
Yeah.
They also have their own subsidiary, Gold Coast Leisure World Corp, operating in Subic Bay.
Ah, Subic Bay, beautiful spot.
I get this. BCGLC also has agreements for PADCOR VIP clubs, catering to those high rollers.
Ooh, VIP clubs, now we're talking.
Yeah.
So these clubs, they offer like a premium gaming experience, right?
Exactly. Something high stakes, high service, the whole 9 yards. The report mentions that BCGLC took over lease agreements for VIP clubs in a bunch of locations. Subic Bay, Manila, Laguna Davao City, even Pampanga.
So they're really spreading their wings in that high-end market. And what about this Gold Coast Leisure World Corp? What's their role in all this?
Well, they're the ones actually running this Subic Bay VIP club. BCGLC assigned the operations to them. Makes sense to have a dedicated team for such a high-profile venture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I noticed a few other subsidiaries mentioned in the report. Prime Investment Korea Inc., PKI.
Right. PKI used to run junket gaming operations, basically bringing in high-value players from other countries, specifically for PAGCOR's Casino Filipino, which is located at the Midas Hotel and Casino.
So they were like the international talent scouts of the gambling world.
Exactly. But according to the report, PIKI shut down its operations back in 2020.
Oh, so that's no longer part of their portfolio. And what about Midas Hotel itself? Where does that fit in?
So Midas Hotel and Casino is actually owned and operated by a separate company called Hotel Enterprises of the Philippines, Inc., or HPI. But here's the interesting part. DigiPlus owns a 51% stake in HPI, giving them majority control.
So they have a big say in what happens at Midas. That's a pretty significant asset.
It is definitely diversifying their holdings within the amusement and recreation sector.
Okay, so we've got bingo, we've got high roller clubs, we've got a stake in a hotel, and casinos starting to get a clearer picture of their empire. And there are a couple more subsidiaries mentioned, right?
Yeah, we can't forget about LRLDI. They handle real estate development.
Always a good sector to be in here in the Philippines.
And then there's TGXI. They run the electronic gaming system called PEGES, and they also handle sports betting under the brand Arena Plus.
Oh, yeah. Arena Plus. I've seen their ads online. They're really pushing that platform.
It seems to be working because their revenue is through the roof, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Right. Save the best for last.
Yeah.
And one more thing that really jumped out at me was this new subsidiary, DigiPlus Brazil Interactive Latita.
Yeah, that one caught my eye too. Looks like they're setting their sights on South America now.
Brazil is a huge market. Talk about ambitious.
Definitely signals some serious international expansion plans. We'll have to dive deeper into that later.
Sure. But first, let's talk numbers. What did 2024 look like for DigiPlus financially?
Well, buckle up because their financial performance in 2024 was nothing short of stellar. Their consolidated gross revenue shot up by a whopping 176%.
Whoa, hold on, 176%. That's not just growth. That's a rocket launch. What's behind those crazy numbers?
The report says the biggest driver was the increased revenue from their electronic games in the retail segment.
So all those online platforms like Bingo Plus, Arena Plus, Spin Plus, Game Zone really paying off.
Big time. Their casino operations and the fees they get from services and hosting also played a part, but it's really the digital side that's driving this massive growth.
It's the future. I guess people love the convenience of playing from anywhere, anytime. And how did their traditional retail operations do in comparison?
Well, they didn't slouch either. Revenue from their retail operations through ABLE and TGXI went up a huge 181%.
Wow, still incredibly impressive. What fueled that surge?
It's a combination of things. They expanded their existing operations, snagged some new Padcore licenses. The report says they had 135 sites running at full capacity by the end of 2024.
So they're firing on all cylinders, both online and offline. Amazing. But with all this expansion, I'm guessing their costs also went up significantly.
You guessed right. Their total costs and expenses rose by a hefty 171%.
Ouch, that's a big jump.
Yeah, but it's to be expected when you're growing this fast. The main culprits were higher franchise fees and taxes, which are probably tied to all the new games and licenses.
Right, makes sense.
Plus, they ramped up their spending on advertising and promotions, external services, and employee salaries, all the things you need to keep a rapidly expanding business humming.
Now, it takes money to make money, as they say.
Yeah.
Speaking of money, I noticed a little detail about their external audit fees. Did those change much?
Yeah, they went up a little bit from $7.0 million in 2023 to $8.3 million in 2024.
Okay, so a slight increase, but nothing too dramatic.
No, pretty standard when you consider the overall growth they experienced.
Right now, let's shift gears and talk about the stockholders. What's been happening with their capital and shares?
Okay, so there's been quite a bit of activity on that front. Looking back a few years, in 2019, they did a private placement of common shares at $3.60 per share. Then in 2022, they issued more shares from their treasury at $1.65 per share. They also reclassified their preferred shares into common shares in both 2021 and 2022.
Okay, so a lot of moving pieces there. What's the strategy behind all those share maneuvers?
Well, it seems like they're streamlining their capital structure, making it more straightforward with a bigger focus on common shares.
Makes sense, especially if they're gearing up for more growth.
Yeah.
And what about their authorized capital stock? Did that change at all?
Yep, they upped it from a $5 billion to $7 billion. That was approved by their board in September 2022, and then by the SEC here in the Philippines in February 2023.
Ah, so they're giving themselves more financial wiggle room for future expansion. That's part of the whole.
And they also issued a whole bunch of new common shares, 691.2 million to be exact, at €1.7 per share back in September 2022.
Okay, so they're definitely not shy about raising capital to fuel their ambitions. Makes you wonder what they're planning next.
Doesn't it? And on top of all that, there's the listing and eventual expiry of some warrants that were issued earlier.
Right, warrants, those are like stock options, right?
Exactly. Gives the holder the right to buy shares at a certain price within a certain time frame.
Got it. So they were playing the stock market game as well. And what about dividends? Any good news for the shareholders there?
Yes, indeed. On March 7, 2025, their board approved a pretty generous cash dividend of 81.86 per outstanding common share.
Wow, that's not bad at all. Shows they're sharing the wealth with their investors.
It does. That dividend scheduled to be paid out on April 4, 2025 to all stockholders who are on record as of March 24, 2025.
Mark your calendars, folks.
Yeah.
Now, the report also mentioned something about their share price fluctuations. What's been happening with their stock on the Philippine Stock Exchange?
Well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride over the past few years, which is pretty normal for any stock. There are always ups and downs. But the report provides a handy table showing the high and low trading prices between 2020 and 2023.
Okay, so what kind of swings are we talking about?
Well, for example, in the first quarter of 2020, their share price went from a high of 3 point nay all the way down to 1.02.
Ouch. That's a pretty steep drop. What happened there?
Well, remember 2020, that's when the pandemic hit. The whole world went into lockdown. Nobody knew what was going on. Markets were freaking out. It was a volatile time for everyone.
Right, global pandemic. That'll do it.
Mm.
Did things stabilize later on?
They did. By the second quarter of 2023, the share price was trading between 3.80 and 2.42.
Okay, so a much narrower range shows that the market regained some confidence in DigiPlus.
Exactly. And those share price fluctuations are important to keep in mind because they reflect how investors are valuing the company over time.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to a slightly less glamorous but equally important topic, legal and regulatory matters.
Ah, yes, the legal stuff can't avoid that. The report mentions a few ongoing legal cases involving DigiPlus and some of its subsidiaries.
Right, and before we dive into the specifics, I think it's important to emphasize that the company states very clearly that they are defending themselves in these matters.
Absolutely. These are allegations, and the legal process is still ongoing.
Exactly. So what kind of legal hot water are we talking about?
Well, there's a case involving allegations of game rigging at Bingo Plus Kauaian.
Oh, wow. That's serious.
Yeah, and then there are separate cases concerning alleged theft at Big Time Gaming Corporation and Total Game Zone Extreme Incorporated.
So some internal issues potentially.
And to top it off, there's a case alleging falsification of documents at Blue Chip Gaming and Leisure Corp.
Okay, so multiple legal challenges across different parts of their business. Not exactly a good look.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, and it does raise some questions about their internal controls and oversight. But like we said, it's important to remember that these are allegations and we need to let the legal process play out.
Right. Innocent until proven guilty. So what's the current status of these cases?
Let's start with the Bingo Plus Kauaian case. The initial charges were for other deceits, but they were later changed to estafa, which is a type of fraud under Philippine law.
So the charges got more serious?
They did warrants for arrest were issued, and 3 out of the 4 people accused have pleaded not guilty.
So they're fighting the charges.
Yep, and the court hearings are scheduled for April and May of 2025.
Okay, so we'll see how that unfolds. And what about the theft case involving Big Time Gaming Corporation?
That one's still in the early stages. An arrest warrant was issued for the accused, but they haven't been formally arraigned yet.
So still a lot of unknowns there.
Yeah, and the case concerning the theft at Total Game Zone Extreme Incorporated was referred for mediation.
So they're trying to settle it outside of court.
Exactly, and they have a hearing scheduled for May 2025 for a witness to present their testimony.
Okay, so that one might be resolved sooner rather than later. And finally, what about the falsification case against that former marketing manager at Blue Chip Gaming and Leisure Corp?
Well, a resolution found sufficient grounds to indict them, so arrest warrants were issued.
But have they been arrested?
Not yet. It seems they're still on the run.
Oh, wow. So that one's a bit of a cliffhanger.
It is, but the point is, DigiPlus is actively dealing with all these legal issues across their different operations.
Right, and it sounds like they're determined to clear their name. Amidst all this legal drama, there was one bright spot, a civil case that was dismissed.
Yeah, that was the Aracelis et al. Rioja et al. Case. The court ruled in favor of the defendants, which included DigiPlus.
Okay, so at least they won that one. A
Yep.
small victory in a sea of legal battles.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about this master licensor agreement that was mentioned in the report. What's that all about?
So this involves FCLRC, one of their subsidiaries. They have a 25-year master licensor agreement with the Cagayan Special Economic Zone and Freeport, or CSEZFP.
ZFP, that's a mouthful. What is that exactly?
It's basically a special economic zone here in the Philippines with its own set of rules for investment and trade. Think of it as like a mini country within a country.
I see. So FCLRC has this agreement with them for internet gaming.
That's right. It gives them the right to operate and license interactive games within the CSEZFP. The agreement's set to expire in 2031.
Okay, and what are FCLRC's obligations under this agreement?
Well, they have to pay CAZA, the Cagayan Economic Zone Authority, a monthly fee that's equal to 1% of their gross gaming revenues.
So a percentage of their earnings goes straight to CZA.
Exactly. And after the first 5 years of operation, they also have to pay a minimum guaranteed amount, regardless of how much revenue they generate.
So even if business is slow, CEZA still gets their cut.
That's the deal. And all these fees are reported in DigiPlus's financial statements under franchise fees and taxes.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And any perks for FCLRC for operating within the CSEZFP?
Oh, yeah. They get some sweet tax incentives, which is always a bonus.
Who doesn't love tax breaks, right? And the report also mentioned something about FCLRC's development plans for the CSEZFP.
Right. They proposed this Grand Master Development Plan with the goal of turning the CSEZFP into a self-sustaining industrial zone and a mixed-use township.
So like a little city within a city.
Exactly, with a big emphasis on tourism and leisure activities.
So they're really trying to make this CSEZFP a destination.
The plan was divided into 3 phases. The first phase involved upgrading the telecommunications infrastructure and some initial construction, which they finished back in 2011.
Okay, so phase one is done. What about the other phases?
Well, they haven't released much detail about the timeline, but they envision further development of the telecom capabilities and the creation of a massive leisure and resort complex.
Sounds ambitious.
It is. And they also extended the term of their master licensor agreement to a full 25 years, starting in November 2006. So they're clearly in it for the long haul.
Definitely a long-term strategic play.
Mm.
Now let's circle back to their big move into Brazil. What can you tell us about DigiPlus Brazil Interactive Latita?
So this subsidiary was incorporated in Brazil back in July 2024. Their main goals are to operate fixed odds betting and hold equity stakes in other companies, both within Brazil and maybe even internationally. The headquarters is in Sao Paulo, which is like the financial hub of South America.
So they're planting their flag right in the heart of the action.
They are. And why Brazil? Well, it's a huge market with a population of over 200 million people, and the online gaming regulations are starting to loosen up, so there's a lot of potential there.
Makes sense. Strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah.
And have they made any progress in actually setting up shop in Brazil?
Oh, yeah. They've been moving at lightning speed.
Aha.
In August 2024, they applied for a federal license to operate various gaming activities, including online and land-based sports betting, electronic games, live game studios, the whole shebang.
So they're going all in.
They are, and by November 2024, they had already passed the initial qualification stage for the license.
That's impressive.
It is, and then in January 2025, they scored a major win. They got the definitive authority from the Brazilian government to operate iGaming products.
Wow, so they're officially in the game.
They are. That federal license lets them offer a whole suite of iGaming products across Brazil.
Talk about a game changer.
It's a huge step forward for their international expansion plans, and it opens up a massive new market for DigiPlus.
It's like they hit the jackpot. But of course, the Brazilian iGaming market is still developing. So there are challenges ahead.
For sure, they're going to have to fight for market share against both established players and newcomers.
It's a competitive world out there, but they seem up for the challenge.
They do. So to wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, it's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We've seen a company experiencing explosive revenue growth in 2024, fueled by the success of their online gaming platforms.
Absolutely, and that growth has translated into higher profits, which is always a good sign.
But let's not forget those legal battles they're facing. Those could throw a wrench in their plans.
True, those legal challenges are definitely something to watch closely. And then there's their strategic expansion into Brazil, a bold move with huge potential.
Yeah, that's a game changer for sure. And they're not forgetting their shareholders either. They just approved a hefty dividend payout.
Right, so they're rewarding their investors for sticking with them through thick and thin.
It's a fascinating story of ambition, risk, and reward, and it's still unfolding.
Absolutely. And for you, our listeners, we want to leave you with some food for thought. What do you think the long-term implications of DigiPlus's aggressive growth will be both here in the Philippines and in Brazil?
How will their foray into the Brazilian market shape their future and the global gaming landscape as a whole?
These are big questions, and we encourage you to dig deeper, explore the source documents we've discussed today.
There's a treasure trove of information in those SEC filings.
So go forth and explore. And if you have any burning questions, feel free to reach out to us. We love hearing from you.
That's right. We're always here to help you navigate the complex world of finance.
So until next time, keep those filings coming and stay curious.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into DigiPlus Interactive Core.
We'll be back soon with another episode, another company, another story waiting to be uncovered.
See you then.
Bye for now.
Bye.